Today I'm going to turn this pile of 100-year-old barnwood into a bar that I can drive to a wedding in Canada. Hi. It's time for Dirt Daily. But first, this Dirt Daily is presented by a company called Steer Smarts. Steer Smarts is a company that has been around for a while. Actually, they've been around a really long time. And recently, probably within the past 10 years, they started making an aftermarket components for Jeeps. And the reason this video is presented by Steer Smarts is because I'm about to take on a big project with an old buddy of mine, my friend Tony. Tony now works for Steer Smarts, but we'll get to that. First, let me back up. About 10 years ago, actually 10 years ago, 2014, I bought a Jeep. It was a 1997 Jeep TJ, and my plan for this Jeep was pretty simple. At the time I had this TV show, Dirt Every Day, and I was going to modify this Jeep and take it to Moab and make a video. And I was like, I don't really want to keep this Jeep. I don't really need this Jeep. It'll make good content. So I bought this Jeep. It was $5,000, which, I mean, for a clean TJ is probably still a good deal. Nowadays, like, everything's way more expensive, but I digress. I bought this Jeep. I started making these videos. I started doing this work to it, put a roll cage on it, put a suspension on it, and it was coming down to the wire. It was a couple weeks before the Easter Jeep Safari out in Moab, and I needed some help. I was basically in over my head, and I was like, I gotta get this thing done. I just need like another set of hands. And at that time, my buddy, Tony, who we'll get to even more, Tony worked for a company that made cars, specifically cars with the badge Jeep on the side. But Tony's role at that company was kind of weird. And plus it's a huge corporation, so things are kind of weird at big corporations, as I've learned since then. And I called Tony, and Tony and I were talking about this Jeep project that I had, and he was like, I'll fly out and help you. And I was like, for real? He was like, I love working on Jeeps. Because he did. Tony wasn't just a guy that worked at Jeep, he was a Jeep enthusiast, off-road enthusiast. So I talked to Tony. Tony was like, all right, let me call my boss, see if I can get some time to come out there and help you. And at the time, I worked for an off-road magazine, Peterson's 4-Wheel and Off-Road magazine. In fact, I don't remember the exact dates, but there was a certain point I was running that magazine and doing this TV show, Dirt Every Day. And the management, upper management at Jeep was like, you can't go work with a journalist. He was like, what? He said, you don't have proper media certification to talk to journalists. He was like, I'm not going to Fred's shop to talk about the next Wrangler. I'm going to Fred's shop to help him work on an old Wrangler, like two models ago Wrangler. And they were like, well, he can't say that you're from Jeep. So if you watch Dirt Every Day and you had seen these early videos and you have seen my other projects with Tony, Tony became Tony from Detroit, which is ironic because Tony's not actually from Detroit, he's from Canada. But Tony worked for Jeep, Tony was my buddy. I needed a helping hand to build this Jeep that I wasn't gonna keep for very long. And if you followed all the old videos and my old projects, that TJ became Tube Sock, the Jeep that I took to Hawaii, I took to Moab, I took on Ultimate Adventure, I drove it 12 feet underwater, I tried to float it across a river. Basically, it became one of my staple vehicles, and I love that Jeep, and I'll probably never get rid of it. We eventually did a diesel swap. The whole thing's kind of snowballed from, I'm not gonna keep this Jeep for very long, to now, I could probably never get rid of it. That being said, Tony flew out. I never was able to say, this is my buddy Tony from Jeep. It was always Tony from Detroit. And we built that Jeep, and we had a lot of fun, and we laughed a lot, and we stayed up late, and it was ridiculous. And then Tony co-drove with me out to Moab, and I don't even know if he was in the early videos. I think he was just kind of like in the peripheral, but he came and helped save my butt to get that Jeep done. Which brings me to another part of the story. When Tony was kind of debating if he could come out there, I was like, you gotta come out. We're gonna have so much fun. We're gonna build this Jeep. We'll go to the beach. There's a brewery nearby. I'll take you to the brewery. Tony likes beer. In reality, none of that happened other than we built the Jeep. We didn't go to the beach. We didn't go to the brewery. All the other promises that I made, straight out the window, because all we had time to do was work on a Jeep and then go to Moab. Over the years after that, Tony did more things at Jeep. He became the product planner for the next Wrangler, which at the time was JL. And Tony wasn't allowed to talk to me about the plans for JL, but Tony would call me and ask me questions. Does the windshield need to fold down? I was like, yeah, the windshield needs to fold down. Do the doors still need to come off? Yes, the doors need to come off. And he was like, I think so too, but we got people that don't think we should. Basically, Tony's job at product planner for Wrangler was, he was like this diplomat that had to keep the designers happy when they had an image, keep the engineers happy when they had problems with actually making the image work, keep upper management happy when they all had an agenda to make it the best Jeep ever, keep the bean counters happy when they're trying to save money. And Tony basically just had to juggle all these people. Meanwhile, Tony, a Jeep enthusiast, wanted it to be a cool Jeep. He was putting his name on it. He wanted it to work off-road. He wanted it to still have all the capability that it's ever had, if not better. He knew there were government regulations, hoops he had to jump through for fuel economy and blah, blah, blah. And so he was trying to keep all of these things together to come up with a cool vehicle. I now own a JL, my little Jeep noob sock, and I can tell you, it's great. Like, I really like that Jeep. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not a rock buggy, but it is a great all-around vehicle. I can get in it, drive it for 10 hours with cruise control and air conditioning, because I'm an old guy, and I like a little bit more creature comfort than I used to. And I can also get to the trailhead, air down, run the Rubicon, haul my camping gear, have room for my dogs, have all my stuff. It's capable. Yeah, I did upgrade a lot of stuff on it, but that's what Jeeps have always been. They've always been a blank canvas that you can build and modify. For example, after Tony was kind of done at Jeep, he moved on. He went to a company called Dynatrac, and while he was at Dynatrac, he and I worked together on the very first JL project. It was kind of the first one in the world. We called it Code 1, and it was like, we went to Michigan, bought this thing off the dealer floor. It was like the very first one that was delivered, drove it across America. Here's our plan. We are driving this Jeep JL, like a brand new one. It's only like 3 days old, and we're driving it to California because we're taking it to Dynatrac. This is actually Dynatrac's Jeep, and we have to get back to Huntington Beach because we're building this for an upcoming episode of Dirt Every Day. And then in about 10 days, turned it into this crazy off-road rig, which was partially because Tony was working at Dynatrac and they had the capability to build really big, beefy axles, but also the fact that Tony had been the product planner, and he knew, he had been thinking about how to modify a JL from day one of being the product planner at Jeep, developing the JL. So Tony and I, again, had a lot of fun, did a cool project, and it kind of became a staple that, like, a lot of people, we blew people's minds that we had come up with this JL in about less than 2 weeks. We went from dealer floor to out rock crawling, and we made another episode on Dirt Every Day. In that time, Tony lived in Canada, then he lived in California, then he worked for Bestop, which was another company that I've worked with over the years. And then now he is back in Canada, living and working for this company called Steer Smarts. Why am I bringing all of this up? Well, I recently got a letter from Tony. And in this letter, it says, Tony and Natalie request your attendance at our wedding in Canada. Tony's getting married, which is cool. Tony's a buddy of mine. I'm stoked for him. I've met Natalie. She's awesome. And this brings up the next mistake that I've made. If you've looked around, if you've watched any of my episodes, you know I have a bunch of vehicles. Lots of Jeeps, Toyotas, Chevys, Dodge, a whole bunch of stuff. So, of course, to celebrate Tony's wedding, Tony and I were BSing on the phone one day, and we came up with an idea. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's going to be another project. I'm starting a whole new project. Are my other projects done? No. Is the flat fender done? No. Is my Land Cruiser done? No. Do all the other vehicles run and drive perfectly? No. But we're going to start a new one. This one's going to be a lot of fun, though, because Tony's going to help me on it again. Not on this episode today, but what I'm going to do today is build part of this project vehicle, and then I'm going to load it up and haul it back to Michigan, where Tony works at Steer Smarts, and we are going to finish it at his shop there, where he helps develop new steering components. And the whole idea of this vehicle is that I am going to pay back Tony for when he came out and helped me and I never took him to the brewery. I'm going to build a vehicle that we can use at his wedding as the bar. Like as the place where you stand and have a beer and celebrate Tony and Natalie's new wedding and marriage. I'm going to build the bar, but it's going to be a vehicle that we can take four-wheeling as well. So today, step one is building the bar. Behind me is a pile of lumber and steel and some brackets. This is cool old barnwood that I have found near where I live, and stuff that is probably 100 years old at least, give or take, from some friends of mine that have land, and there's some buildings that are kind of falling down. We didn't tear a barn apart to do this. We basically scavenged stuff from buildings that were collapsing out in the woods. But this is like cool old lumber, cool old redwood boards. They're legit 2-inch thick, not 1.5 like modern lumber is. Like it's a 2x6 and it's a legit 2 inches by 6 inches. And the cool thing is that I'm going to use that lumber on this bar. It's not, I want it to look cool and old. I have an image in my head. In fact, here's the image in my head. And that's kind of the look I'm going for. I don't like fake patina, but I feel like I'm kind of breaking that rule to build this truck because I want this truck to look cool. It's not gonna look exactly like the one in my image, in my head. It's gonna look similar, but it's also gonna be something that Tony and I can take four-wheeling. My plan is we're gonna build this thing. I'm going to start building it here. I'm going to haul it back to Michigan. I'll pick up the rest of the parts on the way to Michigan. They're kind of strewn out across America. And then Tony and I and his crew and his buddies from the Michigan, Detroit, Canada area, we will jump on this thing and turn it into a cool off-road vehicle. It'll have big tires, have big axles, and have cool parts. It won't be brand new. Like there'll be some high-end expensive parts. There'll be a lot of reused, recycled parts. In fact, I would guess this is about a 65% old stuff, 32% new parts with whatever the remaining math is of just whatever glue we can get to hold it all together. Should be pretty cool. I'm not going to tell you the whole plan because I want you to come back and watch the next episode where I reveal more. But we're going to try and get this thing done in a month and a half. Gosh, it's really close. What's the dates on this? Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of time. But it's gonna be a fun project. I get to work with Tony again. We're gonna build something that, and there's more to this story that I won't reveal just yet. I want you guys to stick around and keep watching the videos. But today's project is we're gonna turn this pile of lumber and steel into the flatbed that will be the bar. What'll be the part where you'll rest on it and have a beer. You'll toast Tony and Natalie when they get hitched, and it'll still be usable. You'll be able to haul camping gear so that if down the road Tony and Natalie want to come out to California and go run the Rubicon, I'll be like, come take this vehicle and take it four-wheeling, because it'll be built. It'll have big beefy parts. It'll be great for off-roading, and even what we build, I'm sure will get changed and modified down the road. But I'm pretty stoked on it because I get to pay back Tony for all the work that he has done for me. And I also have an excuse to buy more junk, which I really didn't need. And I think you guys will dig it. It'll be a fun project, so stick around. But first, let's get to work. That image that I'm using, the image of the flatbed that I showed you, is an image I found online. It's a truck. I've never actually seen that exact truck, but I have seen trucks similar to it. I think that vehicle came from Australia, probably started its life on a ranch or a station, as they're often called in Australia, which are these enormous ranches where they have, like, I don't know, cattle and sheep and all this stuff that they're raising. And they use those trucks, they just use them like a farm truck. And if you've ever seen a farm truck, they're not abused, but they're used. And I'm going for that look. I want this kind of simple, flat truck where the sides fold down and you can use the bed to put whatever in. Why do we not have those in America? I don't know. Like, there are some tray bed styled beds that you can get in America, but they all seem to be kind of either used by the overlanding crowd, so they're kind of expensive, or it's a truck that you rent from Home Depot and it has these aluminum tray beds. And I've seen guys try to buy those, and even those are not inexpensive. So I wanted to build something that has that look and feel. And I don't know why I'm into that. Like, I've been to Australia a couple times. I've seen a bunch of those trucks, probably because you can't get it here in America. That just makes it appealing. It's like, oh, you can't have that? Well, then I definitely want it. Now, the vehicle that we're building with this bed, like the entire recipe of the entire thing, which I'm not going to tell you, but I will tell you that it's not groundbreaking. It has, this recipe that we're using has been done before. So I'm not breaking new ground, but I'm kind of using parts that most people don't use. Some of them they don't use, and some of them they might. Some of them will be cool because they're unusual. Some of them will be kind of dumb because they're unusual. But I think at the end of the day, it'll be a cool truck that will work really well. And if it doesn't work really well, we can change it down the road. That being said, this truck, this thing that we're putting together, you could probably buy one, if not identical to it, then similar to it in Australia. But the wedding's in like 7 weeks. We don't really have time to go to Australia, get one, and ship it back here. Plus, I have some things that I want done to it that they don't have on the trucks that you would get in Australia. So basically, I'm talking super vague because I'm trying to tell you guys that it'll be neat, it'll be different. You might have seen some of it before, hopefully some of it you've never seen before, and at the end of the day, I think it'll be something really fun. To start with, I made a little drawing here. This is just the outer frame of the flatbed bar that I'm shooting for. I want this to be, like, a lot of times tray beds are really wide and really long, which is important because it's a farm truck and they want to haul a whole bunch of hay or baby goats or whatever in the bed. I'm trying to keep it a little bit smaller than normal farm truck tray bed because I want it to be nimble and not hang out a bunch and get caught up on trees and rocks and stuff, because it's also going to be used off-road. And so I'm shooting for roughly 6.5 feet long and roughly 5 feet wide. So not really, really big. It's pretty much your basic short bed pickup bed. 5 foot wide, 6.5 feet long, big enough that you can haul stuff. And I think it's important to be able to roll out a sleeping bag and an air mattress and sleep in the bed of it under the stars, because I think that's kind of cool. I don't think you need a rooftop tent all the time. I think sometimes just laying under the stars would make for an awesome night of camping. So 5 feet wide and 6.5 feet long is kind of what we're shooting for. And to start, I'm gonna build a metal frame to go around it. I'm going with this type of tubing. It's 2-inch by 3-inch, 120 wall. It's not super beefcake, like you could dent this if you really smash it into rocks, but it's also not so heavy that all of the load capacity of the vehicle is just hauling the bed around. It'll probably still be heavy by the end of it because it's going to have these giant 2x6s and it's going to have some support gussets, but to start with, I'm just going to build this outer 62-inch by 78-inch rectangular framework. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can make the corners. You could have like one tube and then the other one kind of butts up beside it and you weld it and you'll have these open ends, which is pretty simple because then all of your cuts are just straight 90 degrees. I kind of want to try and make it some really nice mitered cuts on the corners. There's 4 corners, as you can see in this drawing, and I wanted to make them nice miter cuts. To do that, I kind of got crazy and I bought myself a new tool. This is a Evolution metal chop saw, and it doesn't use an abrasive wheel, it uses a metal wheel with teeth. And I have an abrasive chop saw, like a Milwaukee, it's around here somewhere. I have a horizontal bandsaw, and they're great, but they weren't cutting this perfect 45-degree angle that I wanted in order to get these mitered cuts for the corners. And my buddy Spencer said, "You got to get one of these chop saws, they're great." And I was like, "How is this chop saw better than my chop saw?" And he's like, "I don't know, it like keeps the blade really square, it doesn't overheat the metal, it cuts right through, no problem." So I got online and I ordered one. It showed up really fast, and I've made a couple miter cuts with it just to like test out. And it's really nice. Like those seams are like almost perfect. I really don't have to clean this up. I will clean it up a little bit to get a good weld on it, but I'm pretty stoked on these pieces that I'm starting out with. So my plan is to build the rails. I'm going to cut the 2 side rails, the front and back rail, and I will cut a 45 on one of them, and then I will measure from that 45 down to the other line that I want, and then I will mark back a 45 degree on that, and that will give me each side. So that in the end, the 4 corners, when they are butted up, should make a perfect square. I'm also going to have to build this on the floor of my shop, which isn't perfect, but again, I'm going for that rustic, old farm truck, tray bed, Australian Outback, ute, whatever you want to call it, look. So I kind of gave myself an out. Like if something's a little wonky or not square or a little bit ugly, it's cool because it's going to be this old work truck. But at the same time, I don't want it to be messed up. I want it to be as perfect as I can make it. So it's all right to paint yourself in a corner if there's a window next to the corner and you can climb yourself out. All right, let's get to work. A couple things about this saw. It's really loud. So you're going to want to wear safety gear. It also throws little tiny metal shards everywhere. So it does have a thing underneath it that catches the metal shards, but it doesn't catch all of them. I put a trash can here to kind of catch stuff coming off the table, but there's stuff that's going to go everywhere. So you're going to want to sweep up regularly after you use this. And you're also going to want to wear safety glasses. These are my normal glasses. These are some safety glasses that I'm going to wear to try and keep everything out of my eyes, because I have been there where you're working on a project and then you're like, I got to go to the eye doctor and get a piece of metal dug out of my eye. These are from Heatwave, blatant plug for my buddies at Heatwave. They make sunglasses, they make safety glasses. They also make bifocals, which if you're a cool guy like me and your eyes are kind of tired, you can order bifocals from them. Blatant plug for my buddies at Heatwave, but let's cut this thing. So the settings on this allow you to adjust it and move everything around to get a really good 45. And then, unlike on most chop saws where you set it to 45 and you just kind of measure it and eyeball it and then lock it into place, this has holes in the deck of the saw that when it's set at a 45, it's locked in. And then you can change it to different degrees. It's not every degree, but it is pretty good that you can set it to what most people would use is like a 45, and then there's probably a 30 something. There's a 30, a 15, and a 45. I can barely read anything without my bifocals on, which is cool. All right, safety glasses on, safety hearing protection on, and I'm gonna show you just how cool. Oh, the other cool thing is that when you cut metal with this, it doesn't get super hot. So like if you ever run a chop saw through something, that abrasion is basically cutting through and makes a lot of heat. This saw, pretty loud, but doesn't heat up the end of the metal, so you can actually grab it pretty easily. Still, I would wear gloves if I were you. Or don't, you do you. Pretty clean, pretty awesome. All right, so now what we'll do is we'll pull this off, and then we will measure from that point right there, 78 inches this way, and then mark back at a 45. Oh, wait a second. This is not the length. This is not the side piece. This is the front and back piece. So instead of measuring 78 inches, we're going to do 62 inches. Where's my Sharpie? Always losing stuff. Speed square. You think they're just for carpenters, but they're really handy for fabricating, especially if you're just doing, if you're using square material, it's pretty nice. Now, what I'm gonna do is I have a roller back here that holds up the back end of this tube, but it's actually down just a little bit from the deck. So I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna push down on this and make sure that, well, before I do that even, I'm going to grab the little brush and brush any shavings out from under here, because you want your piece of metal to sit flat in here. Then come in here, make sure it's sitting where you want it, bring this down and eyeball it on the line that you just made. And then tighten that up. Double check that the line is right where you want it. Safety gear back on. Get to chopping. Grab your tape measure, cross your fingers. 62 inches. Bullseye. I messed up already. So this was the first piece I cut. Do you notice anything? Now, 90% of you won't care about this, but that 10% of you will yell at me. See this seam right here? Well, that seam is on the outside of the box. Why does that matter? Well, fabricators think, they like to say that you want the seam on the inside. They want it on the inside of a bend, they want it on the inside of a box, because it looks right where the seam runs all the way around, and also it's like that might be the weakest link where this tube could split someday. So, I'm trying to do this right, and I already put the seam on the outside. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to make this piece the front piece of the box. So this will be what's up against whatever truck cab I'm using. Now, this will be the back piece. So I want to make sure that that seam is on the inside. It's not going to matter. That seam's going to be painted over. No one's going to see it. I never should have said anything, but I already did. And now you guys all know. And somewhere on built, not bought, fabricator, super special, dabba, 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 Facebook page, people will be laughing. So what I'm going to do is I am going to cut the next one with the seam on the inside, and that will be for the back, and this will be for the front. Here's the other thing you can do. I'm going to cut this next tube out of 45, and then I am going to duplicate it to this one. Say you cut your tube, you're building something, and you cut it like 1/8 of an inch off, either too long or too short. You can go in there and you can try to shave it down, but if your project is flexible, just make the other side match it. It's not right, but what we're building is not always a trophy truck or a submarine going to see the Titanic or a spaceship. It's like a farm truck that we're going to go beat around in the woods. So if you mess it up a little bit, here's some ways to fix it. Just duplicate it on the other one so that even though one's off, they're both off, and then it will work out, especially if you're building something that just needs to be square or square-ish. So this one, there's our seam. We're going to put this in, cut the first 45, and then we'll duplicate the length on this, which is right, but I'm just kind of giving you guys another cheater method. How'd we do? I'd say pretty good. matches up. I'm the man in the box. All right, how do we get this box perfectly square? Actually, it's not even perfectly square. It's a rectangle because this side is 62 inches and this side is 78 inches, but we still want it square. We still want every corner to be 90 degrees. How do we do that? Well, if you don't know, if you missed class that day, if you measure from this corner to that corner and identical from this corner to this corner, those measurements should be the same. So whatever they are on one should be identical on the other, and that tells you that the angles are all 90 degrees all the way around. Now, I could do a couple things. I could lay it all out on the ground, measure it, try to get it perfect, and then come in with the welder and try to weld it on the floor. I'm going to hedge my bets and start out by welding, tacking at least one corner, this corner, and the opposite corner, this corner, on my little welding bench. I'm going to take these two pieces of tubing, put them up on the welding bench. I'm going to use my square. Where's my square? Where's my square? Here it is. I'm going to use this square, this big square. In fact, I have another one over here. I'm going to use this really big square. I'm going to use these to square off the corner and clamp them in place on the welding bench. Because when you weld, the metal gets really hot, fuses together, and wants to pull it together. It wants to pull your metal towards the weld. So if you have one piece of tube here and one piece of tube here and you weld in between, it wants to go meow. And if you weld on the outside, it wants to go meow. And the trick is to tack them on the inside and the outside really close together in time so that they kind of pull against each other, but also clamp them to something that won't move, like the top of this welding table. So I'm going to clamp those guys, make them square, measure them square, and then when I'm pretty sure everything's 100% perfect, I will then tack them. And the idea being tack the inside, tack the outside, do it quickly so that they kind of cool simultaneously and they don't move the metal. So in between the clamps holding them in place and the welds basically fighting each other, it should keep them square. And then the corner should be good. And then I'll do the other one. And then I just have these two 90-degree angles, L shapes, that I just have to go boop, put those together. And then I should have a perfect rectangle. And I will, once it's on the ground, like at a certain point, I don't have a welding table big enough to lay this all out on. So actually I do, but it's covered in a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to do it on the floor. Again, farm chic, farmhouse styling can be a little bit off, but if I can get those two angles perfect in the opposite corners, then when it goes together, it should be really close. And then I can kind of tweak it a little bit here or there if something's off. But I'm pretty sure if I can get the outer two, if I can get two of the corners, great, then the other two will follow suit. Another thing, when you, where's a piece of tubing that I can show you this? Okay, here. Before I clamp anything together, I'm going to do some grinding. See this piece of tubing? So this is basically what each of those has in the corner. And I want to come in with the welder, not with the welder, come in with the grinder, and I want to grind this edge because you can see how it comes together super sharp to a point. Well, the metal there is really thin, and I want to weld basically some thick metal to thick metal and fill the gap. So I'm going to come in here with a grinder and grind off a lot of that thin stuff. Otherwise, you're not really grabbing onto much. It's like you can either grab onto the hair of the tube or the whole skull of the tube. We want to grab it by the skull. So we're going to grind off some of that hair, and then we'll do the same on these other edges. Just kind of take off the corner so that there's a little bit of a V notch that we can fill in with the weld. The inside corner, if I can hold this, that inside corner it's got a V already. That's great. This outside corner is just thin metal to thin metal. So you want to grind that outer edge off and get it down so that you are welding some thick material all the way down the sides. And then on these two sides. The inside you could V-notch that as well, but you really don't need to because it's already got a V-notch lined up right there. So we're gonna do some grinding on every single piece. Then we will clamp 2 pieces to the table, use the square, get it all square, and then tack it in. Oh, and when I tack it together, I'm gonna do each corner. I'm gonna do this corner, that corner, that corner, and that corner. The idea being that you want to try and tack it in a way that it fights the other welds, so it's not pulling it and twisting and everything. You wanna get it so that it's like, all right, all the pulling force on the inside is matched by pulling force on the outside, and hopefully it all cools simultaneously and doesn't make it all twisted and goofy. All right, twisted and goofies, let's get to work. Grinder. It's coming together. I have the outside square. I like using these long squares because it might look good right here, but out there it might slowly get wider and wider. But I like how it's sitting. I have a nice little V-notch all the way around. If I come here and I sight down this whole thing, everything looks really good. So I'm going to tack this, tack it there, tack it there, tack it out here, tack it in there on the bottom, and try to put a big enough tack on it that when I lift it off it won't flop around or break. But remember, you're going to come back in and weld this again later after you get the whole thing squared up and tacked together on the floor. Let's get some welding action. I clamped this all down square using these metal squares. everything looks good. Now, there's another way that you can figure this out if you don't have one of these squares. If you know what this length should be, and we do, 62 inches, and we know what that length should be, and we do, 78 inches, then you do the math. The math for a right triangle is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So what that means is you want to take a, let's say this is length a, 62, and you multiply it by itself, so 62 times 62, that is a squared. And then you take b, which is that length, and that is 78, and you multiply that by itself, 78 times 78, so that would be 78 squared, or b squared. And then you add those together and you take the square root of those. So you figure out what number times itself equals the product of those two added together. A little complicated, but 62 times 62 is 3,844. 78 times 78 is 6,084. Add those together. Use your phone. I'm not going to make fun of you. 6,084 plus 3,844 equals 9,928. Do the square root of that, which is the little thing, and you get 99.6393496566. Basically, you get 99.64. What is 0.64? Well, 5 divided by 8 is 0.625. 11 divided by 16 equals 0.68. So I'm going to say 5/8. 99.6393 is just about 5/8. So you want 99 5/8 of an inch from there to there. So you lay out your super long tape measure. This is really helpful if you have a partner, and you measure the outer edge to this outer edge. Now, remember, I've gone and I've ground, I hit these edges with a grinder, so it may actually be a little bit shorter. I'm getting 99.5, which I think is pretty close. Probably right on, because if I hadn't ground the metal, it would have been a little bit longer, which would have been a little bit more, maybe a 1/16 of an inch on either end, blah, blah, blah. Basically, I'm going to go with it. I'm saying that we're set, clamps are tight, we're going to tack this thing in, but that's another method if you don't have a square to measure this. Man, it's warm in the shop today. All this math is making me sweat. I'm getting ready to do some welding, and I'm not going to ever claim to be the best welder, but I have welded for a while, and one of the things, I've learned a few things, and one of them that I didn't realize people didn't know this. I saw this on the other day on the internet. Somebody asked, how do I set up my welder to weld something? And most welders on the inside, sometimes on the outside, they have a chart. And that chart will tell you what settings to set the welder to for what thickness material you're welding, and for what thickness wire you're using, and what type of gas you're using. So if you're brand new to welding and you've never welded and you're not really sure what you're doing, look at the chart. The chart is really handy. It will at least get you started. I'm not saying it'll make you a good welder, but it will get you started. Here's the other thing. This is another good lesson. When you're welding, you got your MIG gun and you're ready to weld, don't put your face right above the weld. All of the fumes from this, which is not good stuff, it's got all types of who knows what magical chemicals are in welding gas, welding stuff. There's smoke and metal burning up, chemicals. Don't breathe that stuff. Try to at least not put your head in the smoke. Keep your head off a little bit. You can get a good weld even without being right on top of it. So sometimes you have to be right in there but try not to put your head in the clouds when you're welding. Keep your head out of the smoke, use the settings on the side of the welder. Oh, and if you're old and you can't see very well, put your glasses on underneath your welding helmet. You'll be amazed at how much better you can weld. Okay, where were we? We are going to weld this. I'm going to tack it. I'm going to tack the inside of the joint. I'm going to tack the outside of the joint in 2 places, and then I'll probably tack the inside in 2 places. And I'm going to try and tack it with enough veracity so that it holds it together, and I can then move it without it breaking apart. Veracity? Is that the right word? Probably not. I'm going to tack it good enough that it doesn't fall apart. It sounded pretty good. That's the thing about welding is you can usually tell how good the weld's going to be just by the sound of it. All right. Don't get too crazy because you got to make sure everything's square with the next piece. But 2 nice inner beads, 2 big outer beads. We're gonna let it, actually, I'm not even gonna remove it yet. I'm gonna let it chill for a second and hopefully it'll cool down and then I can lift it off and we will start on the next one. Actually, I'm gonna start grinding on the next one while this cools and then we'll clamp it down and match it. I tacked up the other corner, so we have the front, each side, and the back. There's a tack on this corner and the tack on that corner. Now what I'm going to do is I will use the square and double check the corners, the opposite corners that need tacked, and then I will measure diagonally to make sure that that distance, which should be that 99 5/8, is equal from here to here. Yeah, it looks like it, as it is from here, come on, to there. It's pretty close. It's a little bit longer this way, but I'm also hooking it on top of a weld over there. So I'm going to do a little bit of tweakage, get it all squared up, tack it all in. Then there's going to be ribs. I have some 1x2 pieces that will run across here, and those will basically be underneath the boards. The 2x6s will run front to back, and then there'll be ribs. There might be a rib like right up at the front for the front of the board to sit on, and then 2 in the middle, and then 1 in the back. I have 4 of them, so I'll have to space them out accordingly so that the boards don't flop around. The idea at the end of it is that the tops of the wood will be at the same level as the top of this rail. It may be a little bit wonky, but again, farm truck, not too concerned with it being perfect, but that should be the idea of what we're going for. So square up the corners, tack them up, and then get to putting some ribs in, cutting and putting ribs in. I tacked the corners in, squared it all up, tacked everything, then I cut these cross braces and put those in place, and I think it's time to tack the cross braces in, burn in the corners, burn in the cross braces, and basically weld up this whole substructure. There's still a lot more to do, but this is the majority of the project, is to get this laid out so that then we have a place for the bar. Just picture setting a beer right here. I could set a beer right here right now. It's pretty hot in the shop. But first, I'm gonna do a bunch of welding, and then we'll probably start looking at cutting wood and getting wood to set in here, making sure it fits in there perfect, and then drill holes and bolt it down. But let's do some welding. until the welder runs out of gas or the battery on the camera dies or I overheat and pass out. All right, get to work. I am going to let these cool, hit all of these welds with a flap disc to try and clean off any dingleberries and make them, like if there's any high spots, get them all kind of smooth. And then we'll flip this over, weld the other side, which is just the top. That's the only part that's not welded, I believe. Wrap, 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 wrap. Ooh, did I miss this one? I may have missed this one. But basically you go over, like they're right there, there's a little porosity thing bubbled up, knock that off, clean them up, and then flip it over, do the other side. What is all of this contraption? Well, I will show you right after I weld it. If you look closely at this photograph, you can see these parts. These are the hinges for the tailgate and the sides. I ordered these parts from Australia because, well, I really ordered them from Australia because I was ordering the corner latches, which I will get to, that are kind of weird and unique, and I couldn't find them anywhere in America. And I talked to a friend of mine in Australia, and he told me who to go to in Australia to order them. And then when I was on that website, I found the hinges, and I was like, well, if I'm doing this, I'm gonna do it all the way. So I ordered 6 of these. This is the hinge pin. This is the hinge that goes to the wood sides that will fold down. There's a bushing that goes on here so that it doesn't flop around a whole lot. It'll probably still flop around some, but farm truck, that's okay. And then I went around and I welded all of them on. I have one more to do. They do come galvanized, so I hit them with a grinder to try and grind some of the galvanized off the edge where it's getting welded on. And the idea is that you will have this tailgate that flips up, but then you can fold it down and slide it sideways, and you can take the whole tailgate off completely. So I don't know if you can visualize it, but there's gonna be a piece of wood here. There'll be another hinge. This one's gonna go basically right over there. And then once I get them all welded on, we will start building the wooden parts that go on here. The thing's coming together. It's getting heavier and heavier. I'm a little bit concerned that it's going to be too heavy when it's all said and done, but I guess we'll deal with that when we're building the suspension. All right, one more hinge pin to weld on. Next step is building the wood sides. The wood decking, I'm not really too concerned about. My original plan for the wood decking was to bolt it to these crossbars, these ribs that run side to side. But I was looking at my car trailer that has a wood deck, and the way those work is there's a piece of angle and the wood slides in and then you press it down, and then there's another piece of metal that basically clamps the back down, and so the wood would literally have to bow up completely to come out. And so I welded in a piece of angle at that end, and I will cut and make the wood fit in there after I get the sides done. The sides are kind of the next thing that I want to do because I want to build a headache rack, or start a headache rack, and I want to get this thing painted today. So I need the back side on and then the sides on, so that you basically work from the tailgate forward and then lay it all out. So this is the board that will go across the back of the truck. This is what you're going to see when you're behind this truck bar thing going down the trail. It's cool to use old barnwood. It's also not cool. I don't know how strong this wood's going to be, how long it's going to last. I'm not too worried because I can always replace this with steel or aluminum or some sort of fiber synthetic deck board, but it looks cool. Also, they have a ton of little nails in them, so I have to go through and pull nails out. This one does have this cool little patch panel, which I guess it covers this knot on the back. I don't really know why you would have it there. I don't know what this board was used for, maybe if it was for the siding of a house or old cabin or something. But I think it looks cool, so I'm gonna leave it there for now. I'm not really too worried about longevity on these. I have a feeling that the sideboards may not live forever, and then I can replace them. But, oh, here's the other thing. I cut this one down to size. This one is gonna be equal to the overall width of the bed. And you can see right there, these two holes in the end of the boards. When I cut that, a ton of ants came pouring out. So I don't know if this board's full of ants or termites or what other critters live in it, but again, not too worried. I blasted those guys with some carb cleaner and then sprayed them out with the air gun from my air compressor. So, sorry ants, you gotta go. But next step is I am going to line up the hinge with the board and drill some holes and bolt this to the hinge. And then you want this one to stick all the way to the edge, and then the board running down that side will butt up against this, but then it'll reach the far end. And then at the far end, the headache rack will be on the inside of the two sideboards. So it's kind of a cool little puzzle. I basically figured it out by looking at photos of that Australian ranch truck and being like, oh, that's supposed to go there. So I'm going to grab my square and grab a drill some holes here, put some bolts in, and start putting together the tailgate. Make sure that is flush with the end. Make sure this hinge is up against. Make sure everything is square. And I think we just, I don't know, measure once, eyeball a dozen times, and hope that it's right. Farm truck, farm truck. Hope I don't mess it up. Need a longer bolt. Need a longer bolt. I don't have the right size fastener. So I need to run to town and get longer fasteners, which is fine because I could probably get some bigger washers for the back so I have a little bit more grip. I'm just using these little flat washers, and I should probably have some legit fender washers. Okay. Run to town. There you have it. The tailgate. This is the tailgate. The bolts are a little bit long, which isn't unusual because before the bolts were a little bit too short. So I'll probably come in with a grinder and knock those down so they're flush with the nylock nuts that are holding it all together. But this is basically, I put some big fender washers on the inside to grab as much of this old wood as possible. Now, there's special brackets that go on the corners, and let me grab one. This is the corner bracket, and this will bolt right here, and then this other piece will bolt to the side panel, and then to open the gate, you'll grab this and you'll pivot this up like that, and then this part will fall away, which is kind of neat. This was the part that I really wanted to put on this truck, and I couldn't find it anywhere in America. It's made by Unilock, or at least the name on it is Unilock, and I ended up ordering these from Australia. And they have different sizes. They have different, like there's a left corner and the right corner. So you have to be awake when you're putting it all together so you make sure you get everything in the right spot. But the idea is that when the arm is down, it's locked in there. And it's a little bit hard to do when they're brand new. But this will sit in there. So like the gate will come closed like that, and then this will lock down over it. Let's see if I can hold it all together and do this without pinching my finger. No, I can't. But, oh, geez, this thing's really tight. This piece will go onto the end of the board right like that. And either up, down, wherever you want to put it. I'll probably put it kind of close to the bottom. And yeah. So that's kind of the next step, is to duplicate this on each side. And then once I have all the 3 boards around the edges, then put these clasps on. And I don't know. I was thinking about, do I want to paint these? They kind of look very shiny and new, but they're nice and galvanized. And then I have to figure out about painting the chassis itself, or the subframe of this whole. I think I will paint this part and the hinges, maybe leave this part of the hinge alone. These, maybe leave them alone for now, and if it just looks really funky when it's all done, I can always tape them off and paint them. I want it to look old and used, but it's also, I don't really want to fake paint something if I don't have to. All right, let's make another side piece. It's funny, you build stuff out of metal and it's going to be square unless you don't cut it square. You build stuff out of wood, even new wood, and it's going to be like all twisty and wonky. So like this board is like almost an inch outside of where it's supposed to be. I want it to be way in there like that, and it's like And it's not because I drilled the holes wrong, it's just because this board is, who knows, 80, 100 years old, and it may not have been straight when they first cut it, and now it's even more wonkly. Wonkly? That might be a word. But, I mean, the hinges work nice, it folds down. It's not actually gonna fold all the way down to there, I can tell you that, because there's gonna be a big old honking mud tire right here. So it'll probably actually just sit like that. But the cool thing is that you can just slide it sideways and it'll come off of these hinges. Might be a little bit tight right now from those bushings being brand new. But that is the plan, is that you can slide this off if you want to take the sides off completely. We'll make it work. Once we put those corner brackets on, it'll hold it all straight, or the wood will break, which is a possibility, but hopefully not. And then at this end, it bows out this way. Basically, this whole piece of wood goes like that. I could probably turn it around, but then it would bow inwards. So I'm gonna have a chunk of metal right here that this will kind of bolt up against, like the same brackets that we use here. We'll be using here, and then those will, this inner part, the part with the handle, will actually weld to an upright in those front corners. That's going to be the front corner, this is the back corner, and that upright will have a big chunk of wood here, and then from here up we can build a headache rack. Probably won't build the headache rack before, probably won't build it on this episode. Probably build it down the road once we have the truck and the bed on the truck so that we know how tall to build it. Right now we're going with this height, but if there's a headache rack or a roll bar type thing coming in the future, that'll be up at roof height of whatever cab we end up using. So I actually have an idea for the cab, but you won't see that until next time. Gotta keep something up my sleeve. Let's start with this end. Since it is the most rotten. And then we know we need 77 inches. So that looks pretty good. So I think if we go just inside this hole right here, and then we'll cut that way. There's a nail right there. I better get that out before I run the saw through it. I don't know if I got it out or not. I think there's still a good chance I'm going to run a saw right through it. Look at that, I cut right through that nail. I thought I had pulled it out, but I just broke off the end of it. It's 100 degrees outside, So I retired my welding leathers for this cowboy shirt. The cool thing about that leather jacket that I was welding with in yesterday is I found that leather jacket in a dumpster probably 20 years ago, and it's still holding up great. I know, don't get me wrong, I don't weld every day, but it's pretty cool that it's coming together, or that it's holding up. Speaking of coming together, the bed is coming together. I put some uprights right here and here, and this is going to be like the back of the cab. So this will be the start of a headache rack. What I was saying before is I'm not going to build up off of this yet. That's going to depend on where it sits on the truck. So like I don't want to build a headache rack that's 4 feet above the roof of the cab, but I also don't want to build it below the roof of the cab, because if you set a ladder on it or some steel, or if the truck thing should ever roll over, it'd be nice to kind of have the safety of the headache rack. It's not a roll bar, but every little bit helps. So this tube needs welded in, and I set it up so this tube sticks out above the sides, the wooden sides. The piece that wraps around here, this bracket, that's going to bolt to this, and then it'll recess into this clamp thing. You'll flip this up. The door, you'll put the panel closed, and then you'll fold this down, and that will hold it in place. Slight design flaw on my part is the bolts that are running through this to hold this to the wood hit the outside of this tube. So I either need to countersink some bolts, which there's not really a lot of meat there to work with, but it doesn't have to be super strong, because once this is clamped on there, like this metal bracket will help hold it shut. So it's not like this is trying to pull away. So I'll probably run back to the store and get some more hardware. These are 5/16, and get some countersink ones, Allen countersink style, and then I can bolt that in there down the road. But I want to get this welded in, get the other one of these clasps welded on, and I'm going to put a center brace here. So it's going to look like this, actually. It's just going to be a basic piece of angle right there in the middle. I'll measure it, make sure it's in the middle. But the idea is that will help space the bed off from the cab. So it looks a little funky, but it's there for a reason. I want to make sure that this has enough space for these grab handles. So this will go in the middle, and then that should help remind us to don't build it right up against the back of whatever cab we're using. So, yeah, weld this thing in, put the other one of these on that side, and then weld that in. And there's going to be a big chunk of wood that goes in here, in between this tube and this tube. So like stuff that you slam into the back of, or into the bed of the truck, it'll come up against this big 2-inch by 11.5, 12-inch chunk of wood that'll sit inside there. So that will kind of continue the look. And then I think I can take all the sides off and paint. But first, let's do some more welding before it gets too hot in here again. I'm going to clamp this stuff in place and burn it in. that's welded, that's welded, that's welded. I like it. I like it. I think that needs to get knocked over ever so slightly. Did it? Yeah. There we go. Drill 3 holes. Center gusset is in. Headache rack is started. Got this big piece of wood. That will go inside here. Ow. Well, I got to cut it down some more. But that's going to live in there. That's going to be the front piece. It'll sit up against these guys and up against there. And then it'll probably get something welded across the back face here to hold it in place. Maybe like maybe something that has like tie downs. I don't know. Still got some more brain power to go on that. But I think we are done with major welding. There will be some more minor stuff. I love it. I love how it's coming together. This is going to be up against the cab. We'll build some sort of headache rack once we have it on the cab. Maybe not. Maybe we don't need it. We'll just see how it looks. All the bed sides can come off, and I'm going to take this thing outside and prime it and paint it. Probably just do black, boring old black. I don't know. We'll see what paint I have, how squirrely I get when I'm painting it. And then tomorrow, I will work on putting the boards in it across the bottom so that it's about ready to load up and I can haul this whole thing back to Michigan. And then the tricky part, making it fit on a chassis with a cab. All right, take it all apart. Ooh, the tailgate comes off easy. That's good. That's nice. This one also comes off easy. Look at that. What a cool thing. Are you ready to see it? Boom! I painted it. I put the sides back on so that they can fold down like this. I put this piece of wood in the end. I thought this piece of wood was going to just drop in and I was going to have to weld some brackets to hold it in. it is so tight, I had to use the sledgehammer to knock it in place. I'm sure down the road I will add some sort of brackets to kind of help hold it in place. I don't think it's going to fall out, but I was thinking maybe some sort of tie down points that can help lock it in place. But for now, that's what it's going to look like. It looks really cool. This piece of wood is so ratty. It's like big, thick, covered in like tar and rocks and gravel. I don't know what it's from. I think they might have used it to like repair a road across a stream or something, but we found it out in the woods and it was so cool, and I was like, it's gonna be great up there. These boards, using old boards is cool. Nothing's straight about them. They go up and down, they weave in and out. I cut them all a little bit short so they drop in here. I still need to cut a board for in the middle. This is about 3.5 inches there, 3 1/4 there, 3 1/4 there, but then there's a gap on this side, so I push that over, then that changes, because I think this whiteboard's bowed. Basically everything's twisted and bowed and wonky, but that's fine. I'm going to cut that piece of wood and hammer it in there. I thought about putting a piece of tubing in, like a piece of rectangular tubing, like the same stuff I'm using here, but it would be 2 inch by 3 inch, and so it'd still leave a gap on either side, and I didn't really want the wood to like flop around, so I think I'm just gonna cut a final piece. I have one more board that I can strip. I'm gonna have to put it in like the table saw. I've been cutting all this stuff with just a normal chop saw or a skill saw, but now I need to rip something and try to get it. I think I'll probably just go for like a little bit over 3 1/4, and then there'll still be gaps in places, but that's fine. It's all gonna be fine. So I'm gonna rip that board, hammer that in there, and then come up with a solution to hold this end down. And notice how this one's up above, that one's down in. So I got this big old clamp on the back right now, and I will be definitely using more clamps to hold all the wood down when I get this final piece in. I have a piece that will basically slip in between this tube and on top of that. Basically it's a piece of angle, and I'll probably just weld it in once I get it clamped down as tight as I can get it. It probably won't be super flush, but that's fine. It'll be what it's gonna be, and then we're gonna hit the road. So a few more steps. Let's get this thing done. Seems like a bad idea. But I mean, I guess I've had worse ideas. My neighbor just came home. He's a contractor. He's probably like, what the heck is he doing? I don't know. I'm a truck guy, not a carpenter. Got it. All right. Moment of truth. Are you going to fit in here? That end fits. I kind of need this middle section is going to be the trickiest part. Oh yeah, it's going in. Look at that. I dig it. That's cool. That is pretty cool. All right, now, where's my end cap? So I made this piece. The idea was that it would fit in between all of these boards and this end piece of tube, and then I would clamp it down, weld it in the corners, and maybe one or two places in here. That means these boards will be welded in, not easily removable. But say a board breaks, or down the road I ever want to change it to metal deck, plastic deck, whatever, new boards, I can always just cut a few tack welds, not tack welds, but maybe little one inch welds along this guy, and pop that back out, and all the boards can come back out. So I want to put this big clamp on this one. I'm going to back this out. And then this piece will drop in here. And that's all fitting pretty nice, pretty nice. And now some clamps. There we go. Look at that. That's cool. I think it turned out just like I wanted it to. Okay, flatbed is built. Now, I gotta load this thing up, put it on the trailer. I'm gonna drive across America, and I'm gonna go to Steer Smarts, where Tony works, and we will build the rest of this vehicle back at Steer Smarts, his shop. But I'm gonna do a road trip across America, and I'm gonna hide some swag along the way, which I like to do on my adventures. Some of the companies that are helping me with this project, I got some cool prizes from them. So stay tuned to all of my social media, my 4X Fred Williams, 4 by Fred Williams, Instagram and Facebook pages. Watch the stories, watch the posts, because I will be stashing cool stuff from these companies across the trip. And then come back in about 2 weeks. There will be another video installment on this project. So I think it's coming together pretty cool. I'm pretty stoked on it. I think it's gonna look really neat with this bed on it. And I can't wait to show you guys the rest of the story, as they say. That's it for this Dirt Daily. Thanks for tuning in. Steer Smarts, they make track bars and steering linkage for Jeeps, Dodges, Toyotas. I think they're doing some Bronco stuff. So go check them out, Steer Smarts. They're part of a bigger company, and I'll tell you all about them some more in the future when I get back to Michigan and we can show you more of what they do. And Tony, you got 7 weeks of being a free man, and then you're getting hitched. So let's get this truck done so that you can get married and we can have a beer. Cheers. All right, we'll see you guys next time. I gotta go this way.